Good evening, I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. What a difference 2 weeks makes. The President-elect of the United States traveling to the New York Times to sit with the publisher, Mr. Sulzberger of the New York Times, and the senior editors and the op-ed editors and the columnists and answer questions, wide-ranging questions about policies and about prospects of the Trump administration. That is one of the pieces of the Trump transition that was unpredictable the night of the election or even a week ago. But here it is. And I recommend you read the articles in the New York Times. The president-elect was straightforward and charming and left with the note that he wants to come back, maybe next year, maybe in 2 years, and find that his policies are successful and that the New York Times has positive things to say. But this isn't about media. This is about a mood in New York that I believe is spreading across the country. Certainly the approval ratings show it, that the president-elect of the United States is presenting himself as a president of all the people, very different from the partisan campaign. Most notably, the president-elect of the United States has talked about prosperity. And that's where we're going to begin tonight with Larry Kudlow, my colleague and co-host. And then we'll move to the politics of this with our colleague, Bill Whalen of the Hoover Institution. Larry, a very good evening to you. The president-elect and his interviews these last days has presented a case that he wants to put together, he is putting together, a stable team for prosperity for America first. Do we see that now in this fact that Wall Street touched 19,000 on the Dow today? Good evening to you, Larry.
Good evening, John. Well, Wall Street is becoming more and more confident about Trump and has had this great realization. I don't know, we've been talking about it for a year here in this show, that Trump's policies are pro-growth, that tax cuts across the board, lower marginal tax rates, particularly his business tax cuts, his rolling back of onerous regulations in banking and healthcare and energy and labor. These are gigantic steps towards resuscitating a stagnant economy, which has been the case for the past 15 years. I don't need to make this 16 years. Don't have to make it partisan. So the market seems to be looking at this. Good for profits, good for growth, good for just about everything. Also, Mr. Trump is talking about trade relations not in terms of protectionist tariffs, but rather redoing bad deals, including the Pacific deal, which I guess we're going to pull out of, which is fine by me. Tariffs, not good. Renegotiating deals could be good. Let's have globalism, but let's not have governmental globalism. And today, you did get records. You said the Dow 19,000. You're right. Let me read this. Since the election, John, the Dow's up 3.8%, the Nasdaq up 3.7%, the S&P 3%. If you go deeper, small cap stocks up over 11%. Those are the ones most sensitive to economic growth. And finally, bond rates have been rising by about a little less than half a percentage point since the election. Most of that, John, is the growth factor. In other words, the real interest rate is going up, and the real exchange rate is going up. The dollar is quite strong, up 3%. This is the biggest stock market rally in the first couple of weeks post-election since Ronald Reagan 1980. And I'll just add one more thing. I think this gives the Federal Reserve room to raise their rates in December because they can follow the rise in long-term rates, which is mostly generated by better growth, slight inflation. And I think this is going to be a pattern. I think you're going to see rates rising now in 2017 and probably beyond.
And the market is telling the Fed to raise rates.
Yes.
That's
yes.
why the rally.
Yes, absolutely important. And I hope the Fed heeds the market, frankly. Right. Now's the time. You know, I've been opposed to rate hikes for the past several years. Now's the time. Absolutely. Normalize now. Take advantage of the improving growth outlook.
The rally, the prospect of growth, and the Republican Party. Bill Whalen is here. We'll first speak of the Republicans and then the Democrats. Bill, a very good evening to you. Growth is good for everyone, but in this instance, the Republican Party is discovering President-elect Trump is a more complex personality than candidate Trump. It appears that the party's making peace with this very quickly. I see Mr. Romney prominently mentioned in the Wall Street Journal right now as a major candidate for the Secretary of State. Nikki Haley of South Carolina is mentioned as a major candidate to be the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Is the Trump transition making all that disorder go away for the Republican Party? Good evening to you, Bill.
Hi, John. Hi, Larry. I think they've done a very orderly job of dealing with the disorder. Keep in mind, Donald Trump, in some regards, he plays three-dimensional chess in this regard. He picks the likes of Reince Priebus, Steve Bannon, Jeff Sessions into his cabinet, into his White House, and it's very predictable because these were people who are on the inside of his campaign. So that's smart, surrounding himself with loyalists. Then, secondly, he surrounds himself. He starts talking to the likes of Mitt Romney, who comes out of nowhere for State Department. My colleague at the Hoover Institution, General Jim Mattis, who's now talked about as maybe the frontrunner for defense. These are just surprise curveballs, people who were not supportive of Trump but now are willing to perhaps come on board and work for him. And then yet on a third level, lest you think that he's gone soft, he's gone Washington, he's still having Twitter wars with the likes of the cast of Hamilton. So to me, he's doing a very savvy job at the moment of appealing to his base, appealing to those people who brought him to the election, but also building out in a direction which is going to assure Republicans, and I don't know about the press, but at least assure Republicans he has a plan to actually deal with the White House, to deal with the country.
Bill Allen, what's your quick take on this Mitt Romney business, I'm going to call it? It's a big headline, as John said, in tonight's Wall Street Journal online. A lot of people think Romney might get it, but apparently there's a bitter debate going on inside the new administration. What do you think about this? Would Romney work or not? Would Romney be the right guy, or simply reward Rudy for his tremendous political loyalty?
So that's a great question at this hour, Larry. What's happened to Rudy? Rudy is like that quarterback who's projected to go very high in the NFL draft in the first round, like in the first 1, 2, or 3 picks, and after he doesn't go in the first 1, 2, 3 or picks, he starts sliding down the board, and now you're kind of wondering where Rudy lands if he doesn't get state. But I'm not privy to what goes on inside the world. The person I look to at all times for a good sign of things is Newt Gingrich. And Newt was on Fox News earlier today, clearly not too happy with the idea of Mitt Romney because he views Mitt as too established Republican. He talked about the idea of a Secretary of State who goes to 5-star hotels and just does a little too hoity-toity diplomacy. Newt wants somebody who's going to be a little more brass tacks. I thought Newt was actually signaling that he wanted either Rudy or maybe John Bolton, whose name we don't hear much about these days.
I want to add, Larry, my observation about the Secretary of State. It's not true right now with the Obama administration because the president is his own Secretary of State, his own national security advisor. But that post in the early republic and through much of the 19th into the 20th century is seen as number 2 to the president, not the vice president, but the Secretary of State. Right. So naming Mitt Romney Secretary of State would be a bold move by the president-elect and would immediately establish the possibility of another power center within the administration and within the Republican Party.
But would he overturn the Iran deal? Is he tough enough?
Mitt Romney?
Yes.
There's no information on that to say that he wouldn't enforce it, or as the president-elect says, police it very hard. There's information for that. I don't think he's ever said he would overturn it. I haven't seen that quote. Have you, Bill?
I've not seen that either. And the question is, if you pick Mitt Romney, does Mitt Romney then staff Foggy Bottom with a cadre of Mitt people the way that Hillary staffed Foggy Bottom with a cadre of Hillary people?
It does feel clumsy, Larry, to bring in a power center that was not part of your election cycle.
Well, there'll be one thing's for sure. There'll be howling at the base.
Right.
Absolute howling. And
right.
So you can push unity a little too far. I myself, gentlemen, think just the inclusion of Romney in the process, getting Trump together with Romney, is itself a very good thing. Whether the nomination comes through or not, I'm not smart enough to know, but just having Romney on the front porch of Trump's club in full public view and knowing that they're patching up their differences, at least at some level, I think is, Bill Whalen, I think that's part of Trump's magic right now in the post-election period.
No, I think that's very well put. The idea of bringing forth people who's Mitt Romney obviously very publicly criticized Trump. I think he called him completely disqualified at one point. So to have Romney come meet you and show he's on board too, it does show unity. And look, those governors and senators and congressmen who are sitting out in the cold, probably the most notable one being John Kasich, at a certain point you look like a sworn loser in this process.
the appointment that I've liked since the beginning, gentlemen, is Rudy Giuliani to state, because he wants it. And because the candidate Trump, I'm not speaking to the president-elect Trump, the candidate Trump was grateful and consulting with Rudy Giuliani routinely through the tough patch of the campaign in that last month. So by hard work and by loyalty, Rudy Giuliani earned the post. And I believe that remains an important factor. At least that's the best information I have, Larry, given that it's all inexact because the transition is extremely tight-lipped, extremely. There are no leaks to my knowledge.
Look, I'd be fine with Rudy at stay. I mean, look, Rudy is a very smart guy. And Rudy is a very strong, tough guy. And the problem over there at Foggy Bottom is that most of that building doesn't realize it's supposed to represent the United States, or even more specifically, the current president of the United States, in this case, right. President-elect. So, the old George Shultz anecdote, he brings in the new ambassador, and he puts him in front of the globe, and he says, which country are you going to represent? And, of course, the ambassador points to the country he's being appointed to. And Schultz says, no. He turns the globe around and points to the United States. He said, this is the country you're going to represent. I kind of think Rudy would be better at that. I don't want to demean Mitt Romney, whom I like personally, but I think Rudy's my guy on that.
Bill, we're going to turn to the Democrats, but Rudy Giuliani, would he satisfy the people who elected Donald J. Trump in those blue states?
In the blue states? The
yes.
People elected Donald Trump in the blue states?
No, the ones that are now red, that were blue. I'm talking about Pennsylvania through Wisconsin.
Yeah, Rudy's their kind of guy. He's tough. He has a blue-collar appeal. He's a working-class kind of guy. Yeah, he would sell with them.
Bill Whalen of the Hoover Institution, Larry Kudlow, my colleague and co-host of CNBC and Kudlow Radio on the weekend. We turn to the Democrats next. A mystery. But everybody loses elections and finds a way back eventually. That's what the Republican Party did after 2009. I'm John Batchelor.